Divorce lawyers. What is the most cruel thing you've seen someone do to their ex-partner? So, she arranged his murder. She called him from a remote location saying she had a flat tire and couldn't get home. Even though they had been separated for months, he loaded up his tools and a spare and drove out to her car where the wife's new boyfriend beat him to death. Next story. They called her job and said she was on drugs. She was absolutely not. She voluntarily let them drug test her and cleared her, then called her landlord and said she had 7 animals. She had 2, which she had paid deposits for, then called CPS on her and said she was driving drunk with the kids. She doesn't drink. Divorce makes some people go insane. He admitted the reason he did all of this was he thought she would come back if she was homeless and jobless. Next story. My brother moved his wife and 3 kids out of province to a place neither of them knew anyone. Within 8 months, he left his wife of 21 years with 3 kids, 2 disabled. They will need to be taken care of for the rest of their life, and all for his coworker. He announced this at his youngest daughter's 13th birthday party. 4 months later, sold their house from under his wife without telling her, leaving her and 3 kids homeless. My parents stepped in and bought her a house in her family's hometown. My brother then put everything in his new girlfriend's name, quit his job to be self-employed, claimed he was losing money so he never had to assist with a penny for child support. He's a piece of crap. Next story. Worst I ever heard was a Reddit post like 10 years ago. Guy and his wife are fighting over custody of his beloved German Shepherd that he brought to the marriage. She fought and fought in court to get the dog. They ultimately had to split custody, but she got the dog first since he was still settling in his new place. When it was his turn, he went to get the dog, and she handed him a box. She had the dog put to sleep and cremated. That has stayed with me for over a decade. Next story. I was working for a guy going through a contentious divorce. She cheated. He was still paying for all of the bills at the house he wasn't living in because one of his kids was still living there too. One day, the water department came to the office kinda panicked looking for him. They used property records to try to find him. Very nice of them, to be honest, because the meter reader detected the house was using so many water that they feared a massive leak and potential for a sinkhole if it was the main outside. They had a crew ready. He ran over there. She had every water fixture running, every light on, etc. She apparently had been doing this for at least a month, just running up the bills to be a real a-hole. Next story. When I was in med school, I was admitting this one patient to the hospital and asking if his code status was current. He was listed as DNR, which he didn't know about because the last time he was in the hospital, he was unconscious, and his wife, now ex, was acting as his medical proxy. Guess they were having issues at the time. Edit. I want to make it very clear that medically do not resuscitate does not equate do not treat. We still treat patients to our best ability. Your code status is only in relation to what we do if you die. And oftentimes, especially for really sick people, despite our best efforts, most people don't come back, and those that do often have deficits. Was it crappy the ex-wife made a decision obviously against what the patient wanted? Yes, but she was not preventing anyone from providing him medical care while alive. Next story. Not a divorce attorney, but when I was a kid, one of my mom's friends was going through a very messy divorce. The lawyer spoke to my mom because she was a witness to the husband's abuse, and she may have to testify so her friend can have custody of her kids. Well, she never had to testify, as her friend was granted full custody with visitations. The following month, the father picked up the kids for their weekend visit and flew to Brazil. She never heard from her kids until nearly 25 years later when they returned to the U.S. looking for her. Next story. Not a divorce lawyer, but used to be a legal secretary in a law firm that handled a lot of divorces. We had one client whose soon-to-be ex had filled out joint tax returns, had her sign them, then submitted a marriage filing separately instead, so per the IRS, she hadn't filed taxes for the 10 years of their marriage. Mind you, he had done this since the first year of the marriage. Meanwhile, he'd made a big deal out of them enjoying their return with day trips, etc., so she never suspected anything. It was only during their divorce proceedings, as she attempted to go back to college, he hadn't allowed her to during their marriage, that this was discovered due to her applying for financial aid. For what it's worth, the IRS wasn't even surprised, as apparently this happens more often than anyone realizes. They ended up going after him as she had kept copies of their joint returns. The whole thing was so damn petty and mean. We were all floored by it. Next story. They owned a restaurant together for years and paid themselves a salary to run it, so taxes would get taken out and all of that. He did the books and did not pay SS for her once. When they got divorced at retirement age, she found out she didn't pay for Social Security. Thank God she had some proof of what he did, and she got half in his Social Security payments. until they both died 25 years later within 6 months of each other. Next story. With all the darkness in this thread, something a little lighter. Back in the 80s, you paid a lot for long distance and could call a number for the correct time. A woman sharing an apartment in the US with her boyfriend got a call from him when he was on a trip. He told her move out because he had a new girlfriend. He gets home a week later and the phone is off the hook. He picks it up and it's the number for time in London. All right, I just want to pitch in here real quick. What a awfully ill thought out way to break up with someone. She's in your crib and you're telling her to leave, breaking up with her spontaneously because you got a new British bloke. Bloke is bloke for women? I don't think it is. But I'm just saying, she's in the house, she's in the apartment or whatever. She's going to do something and oh boy, I guess he's going to have to pay for it, literally. Anyway, next story. So was friends with two brothers whose parents went through a terrible divorce. Their mother was, frankly, bat crap crazy. So was their father, but he was smart, rich, and bat crap crazy. He decided that while he was willing to support his two sons, he didn't want to give his soon-to-be ex-wife one single dime. So he tied up the divorce in court for years until she ran out of money, and because he was well-connected in the town that they lived in, he brought up false charges against her, which accumulated in a media circus, painting her as a monster. And while she was nutty, she definitely was not a monster and would never hurt her children. But the public had judged, and she was persona non grata pretty much everywhere in town. The story is longer, more horrible, and much more complicated, but the bottom line is their father used his money and his power to destroy their mother, and faced almost zero consequences in doing so. Ultimately, because their father wanted to marry his 19-year-old mistress, he was 45 at the time, he eventually let the divorce be completed. As a part of the settlement, he bought his ex-wife a house in a town about an hour away for her and the kids to live in. She had custody of the kids during the week and EO weekend. On the alternate weekends, they lived with him and they settled there. This was in the pre-internet days, so no one knew of the media circus and false charges in the original town. The party line was she was divorced and relocated in the wake of the divorce. People accepted that and moved on. Child support was given through a third-party entity, so she had no contact with her ex whatsoever. Understandable. When she dropped off the kids at their father's house, she literally let them off at the street and made them walk the quarter mile or so to the house. Dad lived in a huge lakefront estate, as she refused to even enter his property. You can imagine the toll all of this took on the kids, and honestly, they seemed to be collateral damage in all of this. Strangely enough, we're all grown now. We're all in our 50s, me and the two brothers. The brothers have both been happily married for decades now and are raising families of their own. I'm guessing they learned what not to do from their parents' marriage. And the other funny footnote is that the father ended up marrying his 19-year-old mistress and tired of her about 10 years later. Maybe at 29, she was too old for him. However, she was smarter and savvier than the boy's mother and made divorcing her so potentially ugly and expensive that they're still married on paper 20 plus years later. She gets the advantage of all his money and property, has nothing to do with him, and has kept him from marrying anyone else. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. Next story. I'm not a lawyer, but this happened to a friend, Bernie, recently. He and his wife have been married for over 30 years. He made a few horrible financial decisions and she left him, lives with friends, and is suing for divorce. My friend had what he thought was a mini stroke and called a friend of ours. They called an ambulance for him. Turns out he probably did not have a TIA, but there was a problem with one of his heart valves. When his wife learned that he called friends and they called an ambulance, she called them and said, "Bernie has a living will and requested a DNR, so next time he calls you, please do not call an ambulance." Next story. A friend who was a DA of Compton, CA, had a case where a person threw acid in the face of the other person. I'm not sure if they were ever legally married, but this signified the ending of the relationship. The person was horribly disfigured for life. My friend was upset having to see what was done to the victim and disgusted with humanity with that case. Next story. In the case in question, we have husband, wife, and two children ages 7 and 10. She immediately brings out the big guns and starts fighting for sole custody of the kids. She grasped for every straw she could, reported him to CPS over and over again for extremely minor issues or simply made-up accusations. CPS took his kids several times, but every single time their investigation came up clean. It went on until the CPS unit manager called her and said that if she called in with one more bullcrap accusation, they would volunteer as witnesses against her. It all ended up exactly where they started. Shared custody every other week. It was never about the kids. It was about making his life as crappy as she could. She had way more money than him, and she knew it. The whole point of the whole process was to run him broke from lawyer fees. In the end, it cost him like $200,000 to be allowed to still see his kids. Next story. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but this happened to a friend of mine. A guy I knew was married to this girl that got cancer, and they went through hell to make sure she got better. They kind of disappeared, but after a while she reappeared and started mentioning that they got divorced because my friend wasn't supportive of her treatment. He said that he didn't want to pay for treatment and take her to the doctors and whatnot. From it all, my buddy seemed like a real piece of crap and wanted her to die. Our friend group ostracized him quietly, removing him from invites and whatnot because of what she said. I then got a message from my buddy asking what's up and why I or other members of the group haven't spoken to him or whatever. I asked how his relationship with his partner was going, playing dumb, and he said that they divorced because she faked having cancer. She was eliciting sympathy and getting off the people feeling bad for her, and then disappearing for cancer treatment while she went off to go shopping and whatnot. She even shaved her head for the bit and then painted my bud like a huge a-hole when he discovered and divorced her. I then explained to him what happened from our end, and then we tried to get my other friends to believe his side. He said he didn't think he needed to explain himself and didn't realize she was going around gaslighting everyone into believing he's a liar. Alright, so this is reminiscent of stories that we've read before on the Really Sparked channel, and let me tell you, this stuff pisses me off so much when people don't want to hear both sides of the story. It's not even that OP was friends with the wife and just knew the husband. OP was friends with the husband and just knew the wife and immediately took her side. That stuff really bothers me. I get annoyed when people don't want to do minimal investigative work, especially when that's your friend and you just quietly remove them without asking anything. I think that's ridiculous. But anyway, next story. So, I have been a family lawyer for over 29 years. 2 murders, 5 self-unalivings, lots and lots of financial crimes, tapping and coaching of children. I've seen it all. The murders were obviously the worst. In one of them, the paternal grandparents called the office and wanted a stipulation immediately that they would take the kids to Disney World the next day. It was about 4 p.m. I had my paralegal tell them no because I wasn't just going to do something like that at 4 p.m., and it made the hair on my neck stand up. Left a message for my client. Next day, police were at my office about noon. He had killed her the day before, buried her alive, and he and his parents had disappeared. They found him, and all of them were charged with murder. The father is still in prison. The grandparents did some time, and they had the gall to try to get custody of the kids. The other one was a guy who burned the house down the day the decree was signed. My client got out, but all of it was a total loss. He is still in prison. As for now, I represent victims of domestic violence and family law cases. People are vicious and people are wild. I am divorced, and while it would be nice to have a partner, I'm good with being single. Next story. Mine seems trivial after reading the other stories here, but they sure felt cruel to me, so here you go. My ex and I used to do custody exchanges in a parking lot halfway between our homes. One day early in the divorce proceedings, my 3-year-old accidentally locked my van doors before getting in her dad's car, and I got locked out. My ex, he had a spare key on him, but instead of unlocking my car, he said, "You reap what you sow, I guess," and drove off with the kids, leaving me stranded. It was 96 degrees and the nearest store was closed. If I hadn't had my phone in my pocket, I would have been screwed. I had to call the police to come unlock my car, and they almost refused because the title was in my ex's name. Thankfully, I had a copy of the court order on my phone saying that I had use of the vehicle. My poor kids spent the whole day with their dad worried that I was still sitting in the hot parking lot because he told them I had no way to get home. Then, later in the divorce, when he was trying to prove that I was unstable and unfit as a mother, he found one of my old journals. I had left with only what I could fit in my van, so most of the things were still in our house, and he entered it as evidence in court. So I had to listen to them read all of my depressed 17-year-old thoughts and feelings in court, in front of both my family and his family. Ultimately, the judge and other court officials agreed that a 20-year-old journal had absolutely no bearing on my parenting abilities or current mental state. But the whole point was cruelty, and in that, he succeeded. The guardian ad litem, who had to go through the whole thing because it was entered as evidence, said she felt dirty reading it because it was such an unnecessary violation. I am so glad I'm not his wife anymore. Next story. Not what was asked, but it was reminded of something. A couple I knew were separated for 3 months. When it became obvious there was no saving the marriage, she filed for divorce. 3 days after being served, he died. A couple of weeks later, police showed up at my door asking about them, particularly her. Come to find out, the police visited just about everyone they knew, always asking about her. Also learned it took 9 months for a death certificate to be published. When it was issued, it came with 11 pages of post-mortem tests. Each page had about 10 different tests, blood test, different organ and tissue tests, a very thorough autopsy that took almost a week. She, of course, furnished the estate lawyer with a copy of the death certificate and the 11 pages of the labs and autopsy report. The lawyer took a brief look at the papers and said to her, "You know they think or at least suspected you killed him. A death certificate takes 2 or 3 days to generate. There's no way they ran all of these tests and did that thorough of an autopsy unless they suspected foul play and were looking for evidence." And she was never arrested, and no charges were ever filed. To the best of my knowledge, the authorities producing and allowing the release of the death certificate was the end of any suspicion. It's their way of conceding the deceased died of natural causes. I believe the estate lawyer only confirmed what she probably already knew. When days, weeks, then months go by with no progression on forensic paperwork and friends, neighbors, coworkers, and in-laws keep informing her the police showed up asking questions, it had to at least cross her mind that they were suspicious. Next story. I helped on a case where the husband attempted to saw off the wife's head. She woke up and freaked out, but knew she needed to stay calm. He tried to have sex with her while blood was spewing out of her neck. The kids were asleep in another room. This guy is such a narcissist that he just stayed inside the house. She made it to a neighbor's house and the police arrested him while he was just sitting at the foot of their bed. His family law attorney was a piece of work. In open court, the judge said something to the effect of, "Respondent is on trial for murder." And his attorney had the audacity to say, "Attempted murder, Your Honor, she's still here," while she nodded towards the petitioner, attempted murder victim wife. And by the way, this happened in family law court, not his criminal trial. He had a separate attorney for his criminal case, hence why I replied to the topic of divorce, family law attorneys. I work in criminal defense, but had a year of helping a family law attorney last year where I was exposed to this particular case. Next story was a legal assistant. The couple was planning to divorce, so they put their 3 kids in therapy. Dad fell in love with the therapist and they hook up. Therapist proceeds to spend the next several months convincing kids that their mom actually hates them and doesn't want them. Divorce proceeds and the 3 kids want nothing to do with mom, so dad gets custody. Years later, the oldest kid wises up to the therapist plot and gets in touch with mom. Mom reconnects with all 3 kids and starts a custody battle to get them back. After exposing the therapist, she loses her license and mom wins custody. While mom and kids were out to dinner, dad and therapist torch mom's house. It was still ongoing, but I quit and never heard anything else about it. I hope mom and the kids are healing and doing well though. Next story. I am not a lawyer, but when I was a kid, my parents had a nasty divorce. My mom told everyone that she was having an affair with a 20-year-old at my brother's birthday party. Weeks after she moved out, she waited until the house was completely empty. I was at school and my dad was at work. She broke in and stole everything. I mean everything from our beds to plugs. She had a moving van. One of our neighbors texted my dad what was going on, and by the time we got there, it was too late. The house was completely empty. She even stole my dogs. We had to call the police and went to court so many times. She was told by the courts to give back my dogs, and she told them she put them down. And I haven't spoken to her since that day. One birthday, she burned all of my childhood photos and sent me the ashes. She even had the nerve to come back to the house a month later because she hadn't taken the stuff in the attic. She is a very evil woman. Next story. Not a lawyer, but someone with a very cruel ex. We had a 1-year-old at the time that I found out about his lengthy affair. He became violent when I tried to leave, but I was able to get away with my child, a few important documents, and my cat that I brought into the marriage. Between then and when I was able to arrange for family to come help me get the rest, he threw out all of my original work from my time getting 2 degrees, destroyed every book of mine and the rest of my clothes, and starved our other pets to death, geckos and a snake, all while continuing to see the other woman. Never once asked about our child. Then, in the years after, he used the courts to financially abuse me, saying it could all stop if I just came back. He fought tooth and nail for the house, which I gave up without a fight, only to immediately stop paying the mortgage. Well, he destroyed it inside and let it go into foreclosure before my name was removed, despite being court-ordered to remove it. He also fought for full custody, telling me to my face he'd use every second he was given to teach our child to hate me. He was not awarded more than some weekend visitation. His affair had been years long, and he told me repeatedly that she was his true love. They lasted 4 weeks in an actual relationship after I left. She dumped him, but my child and I were doing well now. Next story. The divorce is still ongoing. but they are parents of minor children. One of the kids suffers from depression, so during the happier days of their marriage, they got her a dog to train. It helped a lot to give her a friend, a companion, and basically a goal. The dog is incredibly well trained. In the divorce proceedings, though, the dad got the custody of the kids and the dog. He proceeded to feed the dog approximately a cup of puppy food a day and keeps the dog outside only. The dog has never lived outside before and is a full-grown German Shepherd mix. He knew the kids would complain to mom. The neighbors, they noticed the dog getting scary skinny and started tossing food to the dog over the fence. They called the police multiple times, but the police only took it seriously once the dog was too weak to get the fence scraps. Dad now has to take the dog to the local Humane Society every week for weigh-ins. The dog was 20 pounds from when it was first granted to Dad. Just recently, Dad decided he wanted to adopt the dog out instead, and the kids obviously hate their dad. Next story. Happened to go to some distant cousins. Their dad told their mom to visit her mom for a while. "Go on, I got this. You never do anything for yourself. I can take care of the kids." She came home to an empty house. Lights off, everyone's gone. He'd taken their kids and driven 1,500 miles away to be with his affair partner and filed for divorce, claiming she abandoned them. She never saw her children again. Next story. Not a lawyer and not a divorce, but some commenters were asking for petty and not cruel stories. Well, when my ex moved out, he changed my Wi-Fi network to something similar to Whore Town with the password butt sluts. I had roommates at the time. I thought it was hilarious and I've kept it for 15 plus years. It's great watching my husband tell guests that our password is butt sluts. Next story. Not a lawyer. She kicked her husband out though. She moved her boyfriend in the same day. Lived that way almost a year. Kicked the boyfriend out. Moved the husband back in the same day. 3 months later, drugged her husband. The boyfriend shows up, drives husband to a remote location, shoots him in the head with his own gun. She shows up, picks up the boyfriend, brings him back home, has sex. Then at sunrise calls the police upset that her husband was missing. Cops find husband, and autopsy shows drugs in the system. Arrest boyfriend and wife, both currently serving over 20 years. Next story. Not a divorce lawyer, but saw a video recently of a guy in a city close to mine getting his ass absolutely handed to him by his own brothers because he threatened to or actually did call ICE on his future ex-wife to get her deported so she wouldn't have to fight for custody or pay her child support for their son. He apparently brought this up at a family get-together, leading to his brothers taking out the trash. So I try not to get too political in these videos, but, we live in crazy times right now, and I'm just gonna be honest, this guy deserves it. Calling ICE on your freaking... what? On the mother of your child? Look, I don't condone violence, but brother deserved to get his ass beat. I don't condone it, but I'm not going to step in to stop it either, you know what I mean? Anyway, next story. So, not an attorney, but from my own experience, I left my abusive husband with my 10-month-old baby after he choked me and spit in my face for asking him to change a diaper. Before I could file the actual divorce papers, he asked to see our son. I wasn't able to keep him from him, so I let him take him for a day. He proceeded to kidnap our breastfeeding baby for 16 days. The cops couldn't do anything because papers weren't filed yet. He then tried to put a protection order against me. When I showed up to court, I was instructed that I wasn't even allowed to look at my son in the elevator to the courtroom. And it haunts me to this day. But now, almost 8 years later, he hasn't had any contact with his son in a year and a half. Before that, he had seen him one time in the year prior. He's doing the bare minimum to keep the custody case in a constant state of continuations. He has paid child support once a year for the last several years to say he's done it. He has no job to garnish wages from and lives in a trailer with his new ex-wife. Yes, they got married and divorced, and now he's isolating her, like he isolated me. Next story. Not a lawyer. My ex constantly threatened to call CPS on me and make me homeless to take our kids. He stopped paying for daycare during divorce proceedings because the judge left it off temporary orders, then dragged his feet in court for 2 years, and I had to rent rooms in my home just to pay for daycare to be able to work. He'd insinuate I was negligent, stopped paying child support constantly just to screw with me, and didn't care that our kids and I were going to food banks to eat. On top of that, it started with him telling me we had no money for groceries, so he could hire hookers. Then I got our marital home for a steal of a buy, though, without a refinance. 50-50 custody, but with a provision if he picks up more race teamwork that I can take him to court as a change in circumstances. He lasted less than 6 months and wants to go again. And our son is waiting for the day I can go to court and he can voice his opinion to stay with me during the week solely. And before anyone says I sound happy about all of this because there's always some do-gooder wanting to point out that I'm a B-word, personally, I think people who commit SA and abuse deserve what they get. Next story. Second story of mine, since my first one was bleak. This one, it wasn't petty, but it was weird. This is the story of the custody of the pet raccoon. Let's call the raccoon Rocky. The divorcing couple had raised Rocky since he was a baby as a pet raccoon. Rocky had custom clothes, multiple cat condos, and was litter box trained and toilet trained. When the couple got divorced, they had a giant fight over custody of the raccoon. I'm talking comparing medical bills, who let the raccoon into the garbage, and who spent more time to Rocky's nails. It was hilarious, and it was petty. Ultimately, we had to reach a visitation schedule with Rocky and a list of house rules, including sending Rocky to each household with his clothes, maintaining a specific diet, and providing evidence that the garbage was secured against the raccoon. It was my favorite case for a long time, and yes, I got to meet the raccoon. He was a good boy. Next story. Not a lawyer. My partner of 10 years got into debt and was very panicked about it. Most of her debt came from going to Cancun with her friends. I told her I would pay the bills until she got out of debt. I put my debts from grad school on hold, which she called a waste of money, Ivy League software engineering, by the way. And she didn't tell me when she got out of debt, and she started stacking money. She then cheated on me several times with multiple people to end the relationship. With the money she saved, she went with her boyfriend to fish on New Year's Eve in New York, and then a few days in Tampa. In Tampa, she went to some EDM shows and did hard drugs. She told me she was visiting her mother. Obviously, she doesn't have money to live on her own, so after this week-long bang session with her boyfriend, she came home. Edit. I did not kick her out. She was my partner of 10 years and I love her very much. She just falls under the category of people I love that I can't be in a relationship with. When she gets on her feet, she can leave. Some of our mutual friends started wondering if she had some head trauma or suffered a psychotic break. Most of them stopped talking to her. She's in a rough spot. As for me, I will do fine. I am taking the time to get into shape and change careers. I am tall, educated, and loving. All of my other partners have spoken 3 languages, had PhDs, and have been smoking hot. I will be fine. Next story. Not a lawyer, but the crappiest thing was what my aunt did to punish my uncle even though he was dead. Their marriage was his second and the longest of his 9 marriages. Or more, we only know of the 9. And the one that lasted the longest. About 10 years. In his final days, though, when he was slowly dying from advanced COPD, he lived in a trailer park in the desert, and a kindly neighbor lady looked after him. She did his shopping, made him meals, etc. She was in her 80s and essentially destitute herself, so there was no romantic involvement. She was just a good person. Now, my father was executor and only beneficiary of his will, and when all was said and done, my uncle died with about $300 to his name. My father called my aunt to tell her of his death. She had zero contact with my uncle for years, and he told her he was going to give the neighbor lady the $300. She literally lost her crap over it and threatened to sue my father over this piddling amount of money because her ex-husband owed her an ounce of flesh, apparently, even after death. And to be clear, my uncle was no peach. He gave as much as he took in the bad spouse department, but the behavior of my aunt appalled my father. And so my father gave her the money to make her go away, and also gave the neighbor lady $1,000 and told her my uncle had bequeathed it to her because, unlike my uncle and aunt, he was a fair and compassionate person. Next story. Not a divorce lawyer, but worked as a paralegal for a few years. The pettiest thing I saw was someone who demanded the family photo albums in the settlement, then mailed their ex photocopies of every picture with themselves cut out. Took actual time and effort to be that spiteful. The ones that got to me the most were when kids got used as weapons, though. That stuff changes people in ways that takes years to undo. Next story. Not a lawyer, not as bad as things like revenge killing pets, but it always gets to me when someone leaves an abusive relationship and the abuser is able to keep ruining the victim's finances for years to come. It can be things like loans, taking in the victim's name, refusing to pay rent, and the victim is held accountable. Lots of things like that, and it's quite possible to get away with it and keep the law on your side. Also, of course, if the abuser is richer, legal fees for ridiculous things that the victim has no choice but to try to fight. It's disgusting. Many victims of abuse are not only mentally broken when they finally manage to leave, they are also broke, with debts that they can't pay, unable to get a lease, etc., because the abuser keeps finding ways to get them even when they should be free. Next story. Not an attorney, but my brother committed self-unaliving because I think he couldn't handle his life due to the amount of control his ex had. After they had an argument, she was done. She coached their daughter to claim he SA'd her. Evidence from the forensic interviews, legal investigation, and my niece's own testimony confirmed she coached their daughter. This acquitted him legally. She received no punishment, however, or consequence, saving a tongue lashing from the judge. He worked in the healthcare field, a medical equipment technician. His name was slandered by third-party companies that sold his background after his acquittal, and he actually had to pay these companies to remove his name from searches. When they were married, he traveled nonstop for work and was the only one in the marriage providing the financial means to support the household. She had horses her whole life and boarded/trained them. He made decent figures. Both my brother and ex-sister-in-law had marital problems that your mind can dwell upon. Both had affairs, both had questionable, think cult-like religious affiliations. They were super young when they married, and they lived far away from family for most of their marriage. During one of their many separations, she announced that they were pregnant. No denying paternity. 2 other babies followed, and they moved closer to family for support. They had established their arrangements as he would earn all the money to support the family, she would maintain her horse farm, raise and homeschool the kids. She uses this in her defense to bleed him dry. He had to pay alimony to keep her lifestyle, child support for 3 kids, and maintain his own 4-bedroom home. My mother left her home and moved into his to help him with the children while he attempted to maintain his work and 2 separate households financially. My other siblings and I would listen to the impossible scenarios my ex-sister-in-law would instill during his 1-week visits every other week. Daily lessons for the 3 kids across various geographic locations that were impossible to be met timely. Constant communication with the kids, cell phone check-ins, to manipulate my mother's attempts to assist my brother and degrade his lack of involvement in their activities. She documented every mistake and used this information against him in their ongoing custody dispute. The children remained homeschooled up through elementary ages and were behind educationally in core subjects and were socially awkward. And guys, I mean very behind, leaving any social interactions questionable and uneasy as their learning was different. Their rearing was not socially acceptable. It was manipulative, pushed boundaries, and unreasonable. Family gatherings, which were rare, were exceptionally tense as her discipline defied logic and the kids were unruly. Legal investigations of suspected abuse/neglect were conducted, and any offers of intervention refused. She used herbal and organic interventions to treat her children. Mainstream doctors were not to be trusted, apparently. And I will admit, some of these remedies were astoundingly accurate. My mother, she found my brother. His self-unaliving was unique and incorporated his medical knowledge and equipment to administer a painless death. It absolutely devastated everyone. He was not beyond flaws, but self-unaliving never crossed the mind of anyone for him. Both my brother and ex-sister-in-law were trapped spiritually, morally, physically, financially, etc., and never should have been together. But the path was set, and they walked it. Well, I completely understand my brother's decision, and still believe I may have done the same. The consequences of him taking his own life dominoed into an indescribable place of guilt, remorse, shock, anger, disgust that tore the core foundations of our family and continue to haunt our every interaction. I don't blame him. I hurt that he felt this way and that was the only option he had left. Next story. I am not a lawyer, but my dad was a family attorney for 10 years. The legendary story we heard was this woman whose husband changed the locks on her before she had gotten her stuff out of their apartment just to piss her off. So she decided to go out to the woods to gather a big bag of poison ivy, then went to the building superintendent, making up a story that her soon-to-be ex had forgotten to give her a copy before he left to work for an overseas airline pilot project. Then the super gave her a copy of the new key. She went inside the apartment and proceeded to turn every other pair of his underwear inside out, wipe them thoroughly with poison ivy, then refold and put them back in the drawer. And I'm just thinking about that poor guy in the cockpit of a commercial 15-hour flight burning with poison ivy in his crotch. He probably deserved it, but I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And for months afterwards, she still had access to their credit card statements, and she saw multiple charges for more and more intense itch and skin creams. When my dad asked if she regretted it, her attitude seemed to be, well, he effed around, and he found out. Next story. Neighbor caught her husband cheating. After she moved out and filed for divorce, she placed an ad in the paper. will you take your old tires and anything too large to the lake to the dump? Free. Drop off on Saturday in front of a garage, and then listed the address. He returned from weekend getaway with his new girlfriend to a lawn full of tires and garbage. Next story. I was the manager at a family law firm, so I saw bits and pieces of every case that came through. This one is less outright violent or cruel than a lot of these, but a man flat out put in an email to his ex that he doesn't care if he spent every dime and he left himself, her, and the kids destitute. He would never settle and would drain her dry in motions. Next story. One client deliberately hid her husband's terminal cancer diagnosis during the divorce, so he'd signed an agreement leaving her almost everything. When he found out months later, it was too late to contest, and he was too sick to fight anyway. The lawyer who represented him said he'll never forget the man's face when he realized his ex had basically sentenced him to die broken alone. Stuff like that reminds you hate can be deadlier than any disease. Next story. Not a lawyer, but when my mom divorced my dad, she told him he could take whatever he wanted. He just couldn't touch me and my brother's room. Well, he took everything that could have value to her and would be worth most money. Wedding silverware, TV, and stuff like that. Then we had someone break in December 23rd, 2019, where they took jewelry, expensive perfumes, sentimentals, Christmas gifts, etc. Then my mom got everything praised for reimbursement from the insurance company. She got the price set a little bit higher by someone we knew, and somehow my dad found out how much she got and demanded half, even though he had no right to the assets. And he knew it was going to go to me and my brother, roughly $7,000 in total, so like $3,500 for him. And also, he used my mental health to his favor to hurt my mom. He's a cruel man. Edit. He also recently demanded around $530 from me the other week for the gym membership he paid on my behalf because it was my sport, and I turned to the legal adult age where I live in 2024, but I couldn't do anything to the membership because he was the account holder. He said that it didn't matter and I should pay it. Next story. I worked at an office building in the cafeteria. One of the senior VPs came down for coffee frequently. Nice woman, straight, long black hair. She introduced me to her 3 kids one Christmas Eve. A few months later, I hadn't seen her and I asked one of her coworkers where she was. Well, had gone through a divorce over the Christmas break. Husband lost his crap drinking, put the kids in the car to take them home, lit the car on fire, and ran it into their house. All 4 dead on impact on New Year's Eve. She was concussed from the roof falling on her. Kids died 10 feet away. She had to come back to work after 90 days. I delivered her coffee to her office and made sure I didn't run into her there so there was no awkward moment. And she sent me a thank you note and asked me to keep doing that daily so she didn't have to talk to anyone. So I did. Finally saw her a week later and her hair had turned stone white. Not gray, white. Her face was gaunt. She had lost a ton of weight, which shouldn't have been possible since she couldn't have been more than 120 pounds before, and she retired shortly afterwards and moved in with her parents. Horrifying. Next story. One coworker thought she had a good relationship with her ex. Then, one night he came over to take care of the kids after bedtime, so she could go out with friends. No text messages or emails, all agreements between her and him were made via phone and in person. About an hour after she left, he called the police and said he came over to the house because he had been concerned that his ex was leaving the children home alone at night. And when he came to knock on the door, one of his kids got out to bed to answer the door, and he couldn't find his ex or an adult anywhere in the house. Next story. Not a divorce, but an 8-year relationship, then separation. We have 2 kids together, pets, but rented, etc. She was at the time the love of my life. She accused me of beating my son, SAing my daughter, beating her, used the cops to basically wreck my life. I was proved innocent with my kids, peace bond for the alleged abuse, used her friend to lie to the police, and she has now lost most of her friends. She has visitation with the kids and is a habitual cheater, drunk with a touch of using drugs. Next story. Not a divorce lawyer, but my dad is a contractor who attends a yearly safety class so that he has some type of permit to handle chemicals, poisons, that he sometimes uses to clear trees and brush out of areas before they start work. Well, at one of these classes, he was talking to a guy who had recently went through a divorce. Guy explained that he had spent years carefully building and maintaining a beautiful lawn at his home, got divorced, and his ex got the house. So he started going by late at night, and when it rained, threw poison pellets throughout the yard. The rain would quickly dissolve the pellets, so there was no trace of what he did. Turned the whole yard into a dead wasteland in just a few weeks. All right, everyone, I think the moral of this particular story here is, don't mess with Hank Hill. Do not make this man an enemy of yours. He has spent years, possibly decades, maintaining his lawn, and if you take that away from him, no one else is allowed to have it, especially not the evil ex. He will go somewhere else and he will make a new lawn, but no one else will take that from him, and that's beautiful. I'm crying. crying. Next story. So I moved out to another state, and my soon-to-be ex-husband, who was also moving out to the same state in a few weeks, was supposed to bring my 35 years of belongings out with him. I had flown in with the kids. We'd been married for 12 years and together 15, and it seemed like it was going to be amicable. Instead, he put everything I owned, including irreplaceable things like yearbooks, my kids' baby memories, literally everything I'd accumulated to 35, in a storage unit and would not tell me where it was. His dad had just died and left him a huge inheritance, and he basically went off the grid for 3 years, paid zero child support, and when they finally came for his DL and passport, he called me crying because only I could stop it. Meanwhile, I was taking care of my dying grandma full-time, working part-time jobs while raising 2 little ones, on food stamps, and he was taking luxury vacations. We hadn't taken a vacation ever because he was always out of work. For the next 15 years, he took me back to court repeatedly in a mostly successful attempt to owe zero child support, claiming multiple disabilities, including not being able to walk. Fast forward to my son's 18th birthday. He hasn't seen our son since 2018, and he texts the kids to announce that he is releasing a record. He's going to be on all of the social media accounts teaching drumming. He even did this big unboxing video of him opening a stack of records. At this stage, though, my anger was long gone, and this was truly the comedy I needed and deserved. It was flat out terrible. But when he posted a video of him walking up to give money to a homeless musician in a grocery store parking lot with the hashtag charity helping fellow musician fathers, I couldn't help myself. I said, "Oh, hey, that's awesome. Your son graduates in June, and wow, are the expenses stacking up?" Funny how fast that video came down. And it gave me great joy when he took the TikTok link on his webpage down after seeing that my parrot got more likes on one dumb video than he had in all of his combined. Next story. So, funny story I read by a lawyer. He said the craziest divorce case he had was 2 dentists who were married. Apparently, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know the number, but I think like 300,000, definitely above 200. But this was all for fighting over 3 trees. They weren't even very large, apparently. The lawyer said, "And that's when I realized I should have been a dentist." No idea if it's true, but though people might get a kick out of it with all the hate in this post. Next story. I'm not a lawyer, but all the recent dog stories brought something up for me. My ex and I had had a dog together, and when I filed for divorce, I moved into a hotel because I was getting abused. The hotel, it didn't allow pets, and he told me he'd keep our dog safe at the house. I believed him. After about 2 weeks, when I didn't come back, he got angry. So without telling me, he drove our dog to another state and gave him away. When I finally went back to the house, all of his things were gone. I remember just standing there realizing he was gone. And I begged my ex to tell me where the dog was, and I just wanted to see him one more time. He refused. Eventually, though, I did figure it out, and later he admitted he thought if he had gotten rid of the dog, I'd come back, and that we could just get another one. But he wasn't just a dog to me. He was my baby. Next story. My ex filed an innocent spouse claim with the IRS 2 weeks after I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. It went to arbitration, and I ultimately lost because I couldn't prove he knew about the income. We owned a business together, and I was taxed on money I never received. During the marriage, they could argue it was joint income, but we lived apart for 2 years, and I never saw a dime as he locked me out of the business account. I also had a full-time job, and most of those taxes I overpaid lessened the taxes for the business. I just took a withdrawal from my 401k to pay the taxes, as every month when I wrote the installment check was a reminder of how badly he had done me wrong. Next story. I am a claims adjuster, not a lawyer, but I don't think you can get crueler than this. And to be honest, it's probably good for me to tell the story. I never want to burn people out with this stuff, but it takes a toll. So, an early mid-20s couple had been married for a couple of years and owned a lovely house. The husband started to believe she was cheating on him. Even if she had been, nothing would justify this, but I truly believe she wasn't. I'm only mentioning that because he seemed hella paranoid, and given his age, etc., I think he was exhibiting early signs of schizophrenia. He wanted everything bad that could happen to a person to happen to her. He ultimately went into their basement and took his own life. But first, he went around their house setting several fires that would take a little while to really get the house burning. And he was fully aware that insurance would not cover this because it was an intentional act. He just wanted to make sure that she was not just a widow, but homeless and penniless. Next story. A customer had a very sour divorce he went through while we were working together. A couple of years after the divorce, he had a Disney trip planned with his kid, around 10 or 11 years old. The kid's mother gave the okay. Mind you, this is the third world, so it's kind of a big deal. Visas, notarized authorizations to leave the country with the kid, expensive tickets, etc., a year worth of planning. Then the flight day he went to pick up the kid and she told him she wouldn't let him travel. How effing evil do you have to be to use the kid as ammo? Next story. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but I'd like to give my story about my birth father and my birth mother. She had 3 kids. I'm in the middle. And having opened up the adoption and read about the case when I was old enough, I don't think any of us were her choice. She had less than a 3rd grade education. I reconnected with my birth father, and immediately it became apparent to me that this man was no good. Narcissistic, selfish, entitled, and even though I would ask for my mother's full name so that I could search for her or ask to know about her, he would refuse to give any information. I don't even know if my birth mother is alive anymore. All I know is that I'm pretty sure my birth father SA'd her repeatedly, even when she was only 8 weeks from her last childbirth, my older brother, and she had me 9 months later. My older brother and I are 11 months apart and are fully biological. So this man basically took advantage of an adult woman with his mental limitations that gave her an 8-year-old's mind, repeatedly, then discarded her and went and built another family and refuses to tell her biological children what happened to her. I will never forgive him, and I'll never associate with him because of this. I hope someday I can afford to do an ancestry test or a DNA test or something. Maybe I can find her someday, and maybe she's still alive. Next story. Not a lawyer, just one of the kids who watched it unfold. He took all of her photos, baby pictures of her, old family pictures, us as babies, destroyed them all, plus any old baby memory stuff, like there is nothing left. He took and hid all of our kid toys, refused to let her take any with her for us, claimed we needed them there for when we visited him. Then he put them all in a pile, took a Polaroid, sent said picture into the mail addressed to my brother and myself, 7 and 10 at the time, and let us know that this was the last time we would see our toys. He gave them all away, and it was our mom's fault for it happening. My mom, she recorded us learning to talk on cassette tapes. Each of us had a few with, I guess, various times of us babbling and talking as toddlers. He did give her those tapes, though, after he recorded court appearances/divorce proceedings over every single one. I could keep going, but I'm going to stop for my mental health. Good riddance. Next story. Friend divorced a guy that was somewhat emotionally abusive. Never physically, but just generally a major a-hole. She expected to have some trouble, tops for 6, maybe 12 months. And now, it's been 10 years. It gets worse every year. Where do I start? He waits until last minute to agree on any trips for her and her daughter. She hasn't been out of country with daughter for 4 years. We live in Europe. He blocked her from moving, knowing she can't afford their pre-divorce apartment alone. She pays 80% of her salary for the apartment. He sues her for more custody about twice a year, inventing new crap every time. For the first 2 years, there was regularly an event which left her extremely stressed that he was trying to SA the daughter. For example, the daughter would come home and describe dad's private parts. Friend contacted child services who didn't find enough proof, and her lawyer told her straight, if she presses the SA angle, she has less chances of custody. Daddy likes to manipulate the daughter, so she regularly comes home super stressed and cries. Daddy's new girlfriend has a child of her own, and for some reason hates girlfriend's daughter, so treats her like a second-class citizen, and Dad finds it really amusing. Honestly, after hearing her story, I have never told a woman in an abusive relationship to just leave. It's gonna get much better. Sometimes it turns into hell, especially with small children. Next story. My uncle was in an abusive marriage in his early 20s. His ex-wife beat him, tried to poison him twice, and wrote out an entire plan to kill him while he slept. When he finally went through the divorce, his ex made a huge deal over custody of their 3-year-old daughter together. She kept delaying it and would essentially use their daughter to get him to give her money. Finally, though, he takes her to court, and the judge orders a DNA test. As they are leaving the courthouse, my uncle hugs the little girl goodbye, and the ex-wife says, "This is the last time you'll see her." And he shrugs her off, saying that the courts will decide that. And she says, "No, you won't see her again, because she isn't yours." And sure as crap, the test comes back, and he's not the father. Years later, the girl is 18 and shows up to the hospital where my uncle is a surgeon at. She goes on and on about what a crappy daddy is and how he makes all of this money and hasn't paid a single cent of child support. Turns out her mom told her that he was her dad, and my uncle had to break the news to her that he wasn't. Next story. A friend of mine had a very old dog that he had since he was a pup and was his best friend and was well known and liked by everyone. When the divorce finalized on terms that she didn't like, she kidnapped the healthy dog and had it put down and cremated, and then sent him the ashes. In my small town, the backlash was brutal when everyone found out what she had done out of spite, so much so that all the pubs and shops banned her. People would shout abuse at her, and her parents' businesses went tits up because their name became so toxic, no one would go near them. So, as for that last story, I have to give a shout out to the small town because I feel like that's the best response. And also, I'm going to be honest, going into this video, I didn't think it would be as depressing and traumatic. I don't know why, I just didn't think it, but yeah, this was a dark one at times. There was a little bit of humor in there, but oh my god. If there is one thing I've learned from reading all of these types of divorce videos is document everything, especially when there's a kid involved, and do it through email, some third-party apps, or text messages or whatever, and just write everything down and document. But that's all I know, and I'm sure most of you probably know that anyway. I don't have anything else. I've never been married, and I've never been divorced, and hopefully I never have to be. But anyway, guys, we're at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, as always. Thank you for commenting as well, and have a good one. Bye!